TopMedTalk.
Well, hello. TopMedTalk is coming to you from Sydney, Australia for the final day of the Australia-New Zealand College of Anaesthetists and Faculty of Pain Medicine's annual scientific meeting of 2023. This is your host, Desiree Chappell, zooming in from Louisville, Kentucky, and on the ground, my partner in crime and co-host, Monty Mythen. Hello, Monty.
Desiree, great to see you again. Thank you for turning up each day. So I know it's a big ask because it's late in the evening there compared to it being nice mid-morning here, so easy for us in Sydney. Now I'm over a bit of my jet lag.
Yeah, I was just going to say, now that you're over your jet lag, that you can say that, but
well, we've done.
No worries. I'm so glad.
Saying we've done 10 great interviews in the last 3 days. Very generous from the college here and 3M who are sponsoring us to allow us to be in the trade exhibition here, usually around the time of the breaks, hence the background noise. So if this is the first one you're listening to, do please go back and listen to all the others. They're a wonderful, eclectic mix of subject matters that we cover. And 2 other highlights from yesterday, if I may, Desiree. We had a hypotension session at the end of the day yesterday. We had Gareth Ackland joining us from the UK, talking about ACE and ARBs. We had Kate Leslie giving us the results of Poise 3. And Paul Miles giving us his personal reflection on when and how and if we should treat intraoperative hypotension. Now, I'm not going to give away anything because coming up in London, at EdPom London, we're having a POCI refresh, a perioperative quality initiative refresh of our POCI guidelines on intraoperative hypotension, which is a 4-part series published about 5 years ago now. We're looking at choice of fluid and we're looking at goal-directed therapy. And the reason I'm promoting it in multiple different places is if you want to join in on the Wednesday of that week, please do look up edpom.org. On the Wednesday of that week, there's an open session to stress test the recommendations. So Paul Miles will be there, Dan Sessler, Andy Shaw, TJ Gann, and a list of other people with strong opinions about these 3 subject matters. They'll meet on the Tuesday and make some recommendations. But on the Wednesday, anyone who's prepared to turn their camera on and anyone who's prepared to put their hand up and offer an opinion is very welcome to make it, but you can't do it anonymously. So sorry for that big plug.
That's right.
And then the final thing I'd like to highlight is yesterday evening, Cameron, there was a bit of a party, wasn't there? There was a bit of a gala dinner.
There was a fantastic party.
Yeah?
A great way to end the ASN.
A full range of fruit juices were available, different guises.
Multiple different guises.
There was wonderful people dressed up in wonderful dresses and tuxedos and suits. And there was a great band and there was even a little bit of dancing. I just...
Monty, I've gotten text messages from everyone there in Australia of you cutting a rug. Like that you were the first on the dance floor is what I heard.
That's because I fell into it. No, that's not true.
Beyond impressive is how I describe it.
So, Desiree, we should get down to business. This is our last podcast, sadly, of this wonderful meeting.
It is.
Please introduce our guest.
It is. Yeah, let's dive into it. So we're going to have a conversation about trainee-led research in Australia and New Zealand. And our guest today is Cameron Dunn, with the hope that Dave Story, after his session, can join us. But Cameron, it is a delight to have you on TopMedTalk. Thank you so much for sitting down with us.
Thank you so much for having me. It's wonderful to be here.
Well, Cameron, we were catching up before we hit record. So for all of our listeners today, tell us a little bit more about you, your background, and your interests.
Yeah, sure. So I'm a consultant anaesthetist based here in Sydney, and having recently completed my fellowship in ANZCA, I was invited to be the trainee representative on the organising committee here for this annual scientific meeting. In terms of my research interests, I've been a research assistant at the University of Sydney in the area of epidemiology during my studies, and the Brain and Mind Research Institute. So I've had a bit of research into smoking cessation, skin cancer, and sunbed use, and amnestic cognitive impairment in sleeping disorders as well. So that was all pre-med and anaesthetic related. As with a lot of trainees, we have a few issues with research and continuation of research, and I'd love to touch on a few of those topics today.
So Cameron, one of the great debates over time, I understandably, as a sort of academic chair, head of department, I was very, very keen that everybody was research exposed. We understand that most people aren't going to carry on leading research in their careers. But I and many colleagues in the UK felt it was very important that everyone was research aware and research able, which I think is the way Rob Sneed ended up expressing it, even if they're not necessarily research active.
Yes.
Now, I'm guessing you, as somebody who's done research, is in that camp. Is it realistic?
Absolutely. I hope it's realistic. I think we can do a better job of making it practical and making it sustainable. So especially during the training, not having a end goal, but a continuation. So training leads to fellowship, and we want to encourage emerging research and continuation of research as we go on. I think the training program itself can expand what they're doing in terms of supporting trainees who have a genuine interest in research. And those people often self-select themselves and put their hand up. But there are barriers to sustaining that research. And then finding what we can do in terms of maintaining research literacy for the trainees who potentially aren't as interested in research and what that actually means.
Well, if I can interject, Monty, Cameron, I was interested, you had mentioned this word before. When we talk about research literacy, what do you really mean by that? What are you thinking about whenever you say that?
So it's a difficult concept, and for me, I think what research literacy looks like is something that's collaborative, something that's continuous, and something that's practical. So in terms of looking at why we do research projects, as doctors, we're all obliged at some point in our career to be up to date with current evidence and potentially know how to read papers. And one of the best ways of doing that, I think, would be to actually get involved in research. And then recognizing that there's enormous value in the small studies. We might not necessarily be involved in large clinical trials, and I think there are potential avenues to become more involved, and the college might take some of those on in future. But focusing on those gradual improvements at a local level and quality improvement projects is such a practical way of maintaining our research knowledge.
So, Cameron, we're quite exposed at the moment to social media being one of the ways that we get our exposure to research highlights, which is a very mixed bag of opportunities. And I get the impression that those people who've been through the more rigorous research training, whenever they see the tweet or the message, are excited but immediately skeptical. In other words, they get drawn into looking at what's behind it.
I would assume a lot of the people who are genuinely interested in research do just what I do. As soon as you read the article or read the tweet, you want to jump straight to the article and get the nuts and bolts of it and interpret it and take what you can.
A healthy skepticism.
Exactly.
Not negative. Because, and Desiree, you highlighted a great, you shared with me a tweet about a study that was posted which was had a misrepresentative image, which was immediately potentially misleading. Can you expand on that for a moment?
Yeah, I mean, so on the other side of that, there are the folks who do not probably have as great research literacy as those who were probably more involved with research in their training. And I think that when that happens, we just saw a tweet that it was talking about fluid administration and restrictive fluid approach to liberal fluid approach. And the picture on the tweet, I think it was either Twitter or Instagram, showed IV fluids in the context of surgery. It was in the surgical suite. But when you clicked on the link, it was actually talking about sepsis. It had nothing to do with surgery. And so it didn't say that because it didn't have the title of the paper. It just was talking about what was contextually about it. And so I was like, I sent it to Monty. I'm like, this looks so crazy. I'm like, this is not at all what this tweet is about, but it is so misleading. So it's difficult because we do want to socialize a lot of the research that's happening, but it's a bit of a sticky wicket, in the words of a true English person.
It absolutely is. And I think it's important that we know we can trust the information that's coming to us and and interpret that and understand the potential pitfalls and how to get around them. So yes, definitely understanding research And what I have been terming research literacy is a path forward.
So this session is titled Trainee-Led Research. How's that going in Australia and New Zealand at the moment?
So it continues to improve. I think it's still in its infancy, but I think this ASM here today has provided a wonderful opportunity to showcase some of the current research on offer. The program at this ASM, we've had presentations and panel discussions on trainee research networks, presentations covering audit and quality improvement projects, academic presentations, and prizes will be announced shortly for some of those, and then continuous e-posters shown throughout the week as well. And it's been really enlightening to see a broad range of topics and interests and study designs discussed by the trainees. Some of the highlights I've seen have been a systematic review and meta-analysis of truncal regional analgesia in laparotomy and the dynamic pain score impact. The use of instrumental variable analysis, something I'm going to have to look up a little bit more to assess causation in delirium after anaesthesia in hip fracture surgery. Yeah. And then lots of quality improvement projects. And I think the impact of these, the significant impact that can be made from simple intervention. So things such as reducing waste of theatre disposables, the implementation of telehealth in pre-admission clinics, and cost savings with outpatient management services, pain management services, really show what those small studies and local studies can achieve.
Now, is it the case here in Australia and New Zealand, as it was, and I think still is in the United Kingdom, is that you have to get a consultant job, or whatever we choose to call it in our constituency, you have to have a back page, as it was known. In other words, you need at least some demonstration of the fact that you've been research active.
You do. So here we call it the scholar role. And so there are scholar role activities, one of which is an audit project that people need to get involved in. And there's different ways that the trainees have gone about doing that. One of the ways is through trainee research networks. And these are local network projects that are, or even larger national projects that offer the opportunity to get involved in audit and research in a meaningful way. And I think we've seen some very impressive success stories. And in fact, I was listening to your interview with Dr. Jess Davies the other day,
yes,
who established TRASH, trainee-led research and audit in anaesthesia for sustainability in healthcare. And it's these sorts of projects that can that maintain and sustain that motivation in the trainees that is clearly there. And trainees are keen to get involved and aim to reduce the environmental impact of theatre waste while maintaining high standards of care. And they've got a proven track record of implementing change. And they've been a real bastion of knowledge that the Passion Project really does work, and trainees are wanting to be more research literate. And it's interesting, the UK has been used as a bit of a bar when it comes to trainee networks for the networks within Australia. Within the UK, you have the National Institute for Academic Anaesthesia and the Research and Audit Federation of Trainees to keep track of all the RAFT.
Yeah.
Yes, a great acronym. So these organisations to oversee the activity of these local networks and coordinate the national projects. And I also stumbled upon the publication of the Research Recipe Book, which is another fantastic resource for implementing these quality improvement projects. And so Australia's in its infancy in these research networks. I think Queensland is the first state in Australia to have established QARC, is the Queensland Anaesthetic Registrars Research Collaborative.
So, Desiree, the most important thing is to make sure you end up with a cool acronym.
Absolutely.
Yeah, if you look at the map
that's a good one.
If you look at the map of the UK with all the different schools, there's a whole range of acronyms they managed to squeeze out of anaesthesia and research. So there's usually...
So we've got some other good ones. New South Wales has A-Train, and NARCANET is the dark.
That's half the job done, is getting the acronym.
Yes, exactly. So, yes, the establishment of these networks is... I find it's very reassuring that the interest of trainees to be involved in research is really there. But perhaps it reveals an unmet demand within the training program, and I think that's something we can focus on and improve going forward.
So we just take a tangible example of how it can play out, Cameron. I mean, I saw one of the things work in the United Kingdom where an academic leader in surgery pulled together, and this is at sort of professorial level, pulled together a team of interested trainees, and they did the usual rigor of writing protocols and getting a modest amount of funding, and then set about doing a very large randomized control trial, but very, very efficiently, because the people doing the randomizing and giving the drug or not giving the drug, feet on the ground, were the trainees themselves. So you immediately had a network of hundreds of people and could accrue thousands of patients and answer a question. Or they actually answered numerous questions between the surgeons and the anaesthetists working together. But the good thing was that everyone got credit at the end of the day.
Yes.
So even if there was, 200 trainees involved, every single name went on the paper that appeared in PubMed. Because you can do this thing where you say on behalf of Swarm, for example, or Quark, or A-Train. And then behind that you have the long listing. So then you have a PubMed listed publication to go on your back page.
Yes.
And even if you never want to do research again, you understand the conduct of research.
Absolutely. We've got a lot to learn. I think it's something to strive for, and hopefully these networks will be able to reach the quality RCTs in future.
So the challenge we faced in the UK was the first few networks that got together fell over eventually, because the young enthusiastic people who put it together don't want help from the old, because the old will be stifling and controlling.
Slow is the word I
exactly slow. Was it male? Pale, was John Myberg telling me I am the other day? I'm male, pale, stale, and something else. But anyway, but if you don't embrace a little bit of help from the old, or the institutions, or the associations, or the colleges, when those enthusiastic individuals move on, it tends to fade. So can you think of a way you might be able to strike a balance there, Cameron?
There are a couple of different things we've thought of, and admittedly, I think each institute, each state is approaching the college individually at the moment. But having a collaborative agreement between the college and these networks is a great way to start, whereby there might be some funding potentially available, but there is a separation in terms of the decision for which clinical studies are done, which research is undertaken, and making sure it is limited to the trainees and they are allowed their independence. So I think if it's written into the bylaws, then it's definitely a way forward.
Because you don't need much support. In other words, a little bit of a secretariat, the websites, some data management, ideally a bit of stats support, a few signposting, that sort of thing.
Yeah, I think often the most important thing is the website, because people are drawn to having a location to have these network opportunities. So the outset cost is quite minimal, and then as you get interested parties coming through, the motivation changes.
Can you tell us a little bit more about some of the things that are happening there at the meeting that you think are going to contribute to the sustainability of these programs?
I think first and foremost, the meeting acts as a remotivator. So the trainees that do attend, they are stimulated, they can go to all the different sessions, and that really lets them run free with these ideas, because I think the main thing that creates sustainability in a research project is your own passion within that project, and to let them bring their own passion project further through is only something we should be really supporting. What can we do better in terms of the trainees? I know the surveys that have looked at the trainee attitudes in both Queensland and Victoria, they've got response rates of around 50%, and a lot of the trainees feel that the vast majority of trainees feel that research is a very important part of their research training, and around 40 to 60% want to be more involved in research. And roughly 1/3 of those want to be involved in trainee research networks. But the training pathways are difficult, and as I mentioned before, research is often one of the first things that falls away, and the barriers that keep coming up when we talk to trainees about this are a lack of time, a lack of access to education and training, a lack of access to appropriate research mentoring potentially, and rotating between hospitals. And for those with a genuine interest in research, there needs to be a sacrifice of time outside of the rostered hours to meaningfully contribute to research. So how can the college support that? It's a very difficult area to cover. I think one of the areas that I'd like to see for those with potentially without the genuine interest would be dissemination and integration of clinical trials into practice, because there is a delay in when the clinical trial is published and when it is potentially implemented. And you talked a little bit about that yesterday with the clinical trials network team.
Yes, implementation is a science in itself.
It is. And I like the idea of, so for instance, when Rocket is published, some of the trainees...
Remind us about Rocket.
Rocket is the ketamine trial looking at low-dose ketamine intraoperatively and for a continuation of 72 hours, looking at post-operative pain at, I think, the 3-month mark.
Right. Do we know the result of that yet?
I was just going to say,
we do not. Sorry, I have no inside knowledge. But when the results of and for the relief trial, as you mentioned, implementing these large findings into clinical practice at your local institution, that's a quality improvement project at every local institution.
Yes.
That I think those trainees can take back and learn how to practically institute change. I'm a big human factors fan, so I like the things like the WHO checklist, the stop before you block things, where you have that top-down, make it happen, reduce the barriers to do something right, and increase the barriers for doing something wrong.
Excellent. Yeah. You'd like a bit of that, wouldn't you, Desiree? You should tell Cameron what your job is at home and the number of cats you have to herd.
So my other job, the other hat I wear, I'm Vice President of Clinical Quality for North Star Anesthesia. It's a large national anesthesia company, an organization within the U.S. We have over 200 facilities and almost 3,000 providers. So, about the same size as the UK, a small country. And we're a bit disparate, spread out over about 25 different states. So my job, or one of them, is exactly what you're talking about. How do we actually implement, those practices that are coming out of the research and that are evidence-based? And it is very hard. And during this conversation, I know a lot of people want to be in trainees. We want to be involved in research. And I think you're alluding to this earlier about the value of the big RCTs and figuring out those big, huge questions. But on the flip side of that, isn't QI almost as important, whenever we talk about, and the ability to do that, because that's a whole nother skill set that trainees need to know that as well. And maybe not all of them can be super research oriented doing these big trials, but maybe QI is their thing and maybe not want to take away from that. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that, Cameron?
No, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. The quality improvement, you can see the practical implications of your change. And as anaesthetists, we deal with that every day. Some of us, that's the reason why we do anesthetics, because we like to see change at the end of the syringe or immediate impact. And that's where you'll see it. Clinical trials are large scale, sometimes a little bit removed from that personal interaction and patient interaction that we see. So it's, those local changes where people might see that impact.
Yeah, so being a successful researcher, clinical trialist is very highly valued in certain roles and positions. But being successful at quality improvement is valued almost everywhere.
Globally.
Yes. Yeah, and if you go beyond that and you become an expert in human factors and implementation science, there's a very bright future ahead.
Yes, absolutely.
Because, there are jobs like Desiree's and a whole field of this all over the world where people are looking to make real change. So, I think people, if they don't like classical research, if we call it that, I hope they don't back away from all the other opportunities.
No. Yeah. The world of research has many opportunities. You can take it as you'd like.
Cameron, we have had an amazing conversation. Thank you so much for sitting down with us. And thank you for the great work that you're doing. I know it's a lot as you come out of training to then lead in this space, but it's clearly needed and sounds like you're doing a great job. Thank you so much for sitting down with us. And thank you for listening to TopMedTalk. As always, TopMedTalk is here to bring you insightful conversations with experts, thought-provoking guests, and invaluable insights. And so we also wanted to say thank you to our sponsors. I know Monty gave a big shout out to ANZCA and 3M for the support to have us on the ground. And we also want to give a big thanks to all of our platinum sponsors, Edwards, GE Healthcare, Medtronic. We couldn't do this without you. Our mission is to make the world healthier through the power of conversation. And thanks to them, we're able to do it. And here's another great example. So you guys have a great rest of the meeting. I think you only have a little bit left there in Sydney, and have a great rest of your trip. And thank you guys so much for listening.
Thanks, Desiree.
Thank you.
TopMedTalk.
Thanks for downloading TopMedTalk. Don't forget to subscribe via your podcatcher. Don't forget to check us out on social media. We're on Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. And also, don't forget, TopMedTalk is the broadcasting arm of EBPOM, Evidence-Based Perioperative Medicine. We'd love you to find out more about that. If you check out ebpom.org, you can find low prices on some of the conferences we're organising around the world. Many of them are virtual and don't even involve you leaving your own home. Check out ebpom.org now.